Former South Australian Premier Rob Kerrin and Will Goodings are your hosts for Rural Live TV, Mondays and Thursdays from 1 p.m. Australian Central Time on AustraliaLiveTV.com. Brought to you by TNR Pastoral, Rural Live steps outside the city limits and digs deeper than the headlines, speaking directly with industry leaders from mining to agriculture, covering a vast number of rural topics. If you're after the latest rural news, weather, technology and market updates with a wealth of knowledge and experience, then log on to Rural Live TV, brought to you by TNR Pastoral, Mondays and Thursdays from 1 p.m. on AustraliaLiveTV.com.
Welcome back to Rural Live TV. Thanks to the wonderful people at TNR Pastoral. Rob, we mentioned before the break, an incredibly emotive issue in this country is about foreign ownership and foreign takeovers of Australian assets, be they agricultural land or simply financial institutions. Today, we talk about the proposed takeover of SunRice by Ebro Foods, the Spanish company who have plans afoot to make a bold $600 million bid. Yeah. Rob, you get a sense, and I guess this is where people get a little bit upset, is that they see some industries like this that have struggled due to drought and other things, and they think ripe for the picking, and a foreign institution comes in and makes the purchase. It might not be factually accurate, but that's certainly the underlying sentiment you get from a lot of people who simply pick up the paper and read this kind of thing. I guess the question is it the kind of thing we need to look at on a case-by-case basis like the Foreign Investment Review Board does? Or do we need to have a more blanket overall approach and say Australia needs to protect X assets?
Yeah, look, I think it's got to be looked at on an overall basis, because the issue we've got at the moment is that there's so much precedent having been set for allowing this to happen. Yeah. It is now pretty hard for the Foreign Investment Review Board to sort of say, no, this can't go ahead and that can't go ahead. I think we need sort of perhaps a policy change, a review of the whole situation as it is. And what might actually come out of that is we might find that the horse has bolted a fair way down the track already.
You'd hate to think that. And perhaps that's the first question we'll put to our next guest, Lynne Wilkinson, the CEO of AUSBUY. Lynne, welcome to the program. Is it your fear when you read and hear about cases like this with regard to SunRice that the horse may well and truly have bolted, or can we still do something about it?
Well, I think the horse has never bolted while ever a government is going to make decisions about its own country. But one of the problems we've got, we're saying the Spanish are buying this, but basically we have global companies that defy borders, and they may be based in Spain for tax purposes. But this is an asset which, as you've rightly said, farmers have struggled, through drought. And certainly SunRice is a farming cooperative and a very successful one, mind you, but you could almost understand why some farmers would want to sell out. However, they've struggled through the bad times. It'd be good if the Murray-Darling can get their act together, that there will be some good times ahead. I mean, SunRice is importing product from overseas, and certainly consumers can still buy Australian-grown rice. But the FIRB just doesn't seem to want to know about these strategic industries. I think it does need to be looked at overall. Food security is a major issue in this country, and we have allowed foreign companies to buy not so much the farms, they're doing that certainly, but the channels of distribution. So they're buying the brands, they're buying the part where the money is made, and leaving our farmers to be price takers, not price makers. And we are doing this in every major food industry and allowing it to happen.
Yeah, I suppose it's an interesting time with the rice growers. They're much maligned, the rice industry, by those down the system. I've always been a little bit sympathetic towards them. I think they've copped a lot of criticism over time. That is not necessarily the case. They've gone through a period of time when the plantings of rice have been down a long way, but through that period, talking to some of the growers up there, they probably haven't done too badly financially out of it, and that they've been able to sell their water on a temporary basis. So it's going to be interesting to see it. And now they face a couple of years probably where they'll get reasonable water for a couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see what the shareholder reaction is to this.
And certainly it's a great shame that shareholders have to make the decisions where the government and the FIRB should be supporting and our own businesses. AUSBUY says that if we are foreign owned, well then the decisions are not made here and the profits don't stay here. 75% of our dairy industry is foreign-owned, or the distribution channels are foreign-owned, and if fosters, demergers and foreign interests take that, which is very much on the cards early in the new year, then 95% of our brewing industry. Now, both of those industries feed back into the down the line into consumers' everyday needs, but at the source for our farmers. And no other developed country would allow this to happen.
Yeah, and I suppose when you talk breweries and wine companies and that, they're very much now, they've moved right away from grower control to very institutional control. And I suppose this is the time where the rice industry may well follow suit and sort of move right outside the hands of the growers.
Certainly, if you have a look at some recent cases, Golden Circle was a farming cooperative. Heinz bought that. Now they're buying the brand. They're not necessarily, going to be supporting our farmers long term. More recently, CSR has gone into the hands of the Singaporeans, who basically trade and grow crops for ethanol. So that's a potential risk to our sugar growers from a food source, and certainly food security is what we're talking about. We're not talking about alternative fuel technologies at this stage. And globally, the world recognises that food security is a major issue as populations emerge and grow. And you'd have to say that our farmers are most productive and the most skilled in the world, because they do suffer, with very little support. They do suffer through droughts and pestilence, so to speak. But they're a very highly skilled group of professionals. And how they manage to keep their heads up and keep going at times, one wonders when these things are happening.
Yeah. Lynne, is there such thing as a happy medium then? Certainly we would appear to have subsequent governments, consecutive governments for a number of years now that are clearly not too dissatisfied with foreign investment in companies and industries like this. For yours and for the perspective of AUSBUY, is there perhaps a safe percentage of something like the food processing or production industry that should be at all times quarantined from foreign investment, or should it simply be that all of it at all times should be Australian controlled, or is that simply a bridge too far?
Yes, we can't talk in absolutes because the horse has bolted in that sense. And, the mantra of those people who are not in the industry talk about the World Trade Organisation. But anyone who is in the food industry and has ever tried to export, knows that the doors are closed. In reality, everyone is protecting their food sources. From our perspective, you have a look at manufacturing. There's only one major manufacturer in Australia that's doing chilled and frozen food, and that's Simplot. McCain's have just closed their last factory here and taken it to New Zealand. People like sheep, they continue to buy products without looking who owns them or where they come from. And global companies, there was some discussion on the weekend that, Britain colonised and it built up all these various countries that then supplied it with raw materials that it exported to. America has not been a coloniser, but it's been very good at creating global companies. And these global companies actually don't have to worry about borders, and they don't have to worry about national sovereignty. And if they don't like what a country does, then they just move offshore and then proceed to send the product back in to consumers. Our retailers are often castigated for being greedy, but really when you look at it, our middlemen in this country in the food industry are the ones that are essentially foreign-owned, and we do not call it investment. We basically say true investment is where you actually risk your capital, and this is not investment. It's actually taking businesses that Australians have built. We've done the hard yards, we've taken the risks, and they're buying cash flow, and so it's not really investment for us is a misnomer.
No, that's a very important point and a good definition to be made. Lynne, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
Lynne Wilkinson, the CEO of AUSBUY there. The message very much would seem to be, Rob, don't sell the cow, sell the milk.
Former South Australian Premier Rob Kerrin and Will Goodings are your hosts for Rural Live TV, Mondays and Thursdays from 1 p.m. Australian Central Time on AustraliaLiveTV.com. Brought to you by TNR Pastoral, Rural Live steps outside the city limits and digs deeper than the headlines, speaking directly with industry leaders from mining to agriculture, covering a vast number of rural topics. If you're after the latest rural news, weather, technology and market updates with a wealth of knowledge and experience, then log on to Rural Live TV, brought to you by TNR Pastoral, Mondays and Thursdays from 1 p.m. on AustraliaLiveTV.com.